In a year full of drama about Shedeur Sanders' stock tanking, a lot of the attention originally on this all-time strong running back class was completely misdirected. Everyone is still talking about Ashton Genty and Omarion Hampton, but it seems people are forgetting just how deep this class actually is. Travion Henderson, for example, picked up a lot of steam towards the end of the pre-draft process, and you saw a lot of rumors about Judkins and Scatabo. But one of the reasons I was following this class so closely is because of the names that went even lower than the second and third round. We're talking people in the 5th and 6th that maybe didn't get the opportunity to show what they really can deliver to an NFL team. With that being said, I found that the player I was looking at the most ended up playing all 4 years at Kansas and going in the 6th round to the Saints. If you haven't heard of him, his name is Devin Neal, and he's a Swiss Army knife style of guy that actually reminds me a lot of his new teammate in New Orleans, Alvin Kamara. Kamara definitely leans more on the concept of a receiving back. After all, it's really rare to find a player that's capable of rushing for 700 and also racking up more than 800 receiving yards as well. While Neal shows a ton of promise in the pass game, to equate the two is a bit of a stretch. He consistently does well at getting outside of the backfield and into the flat or upfield with precise route running and pretty great hands. But to say that he's the exact same player as Kamara is a bit of a stretch. My comparison is in the more overall sense of their games. I believe Neal is capable of a similar body of work. It's not often you find running backs with long careers. Even though it's one of my favorite positions on the field, I do have to admit that the positional lifespan can be very short, whether that be due to injuries or age. Most of the time it ends up being a combination of both. Todd Gurley went from being the top of the league to struggling to stay in it within the span of a couple years. Phillip Lindsay looked like the next big thing for Denver, running for back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Due to injuries, his total halved the next year, and again the next year. It's one of those things that breaks my heart watching these players run until they literally can't anymore. It's why I believe the most important ability for a running back is the ability to do just about anything. When the speed goes and the shiftiness starts to fade, what do you have left? And thankfully for players like Neal, there's a lot. It might seem a bit ridiculous to say this, but running back is not a position that necessarily requires physical traits. Sure, the faster you are, the easier it might be, but it's not a demand. Sure, a 4.58 at the combine like Neal scored isn't exactly something you should be proud of, and it does leave a lot to be desired. But compared to some of the other players in the class, you know what you're getting. He's not going to break as many tackles as someone like Ashton Genty, but Neal is consistent, and despite getting jammed when he tries to be a little too patient, he has great inside moves, and his timing and pace is elite. I love to watch how he lets blocks develop. That part of his game shows his high-level IQ and thinking. It's one of the reasons why I believe he's going to have such a long NFL career. He doesn't need to be fast to get yards and first downs. He proved that in college for 4 long years. It might not come with as much glory, but there is always going to be a place for consistent running backs that can be relied on. Ahmad Bradshaw was vital in Eli Manning's Super Bowl runs, and Jonathan Stewart had 9 long years with the Panthers. Look, maybe these guys don't get as much recognition as Adrian Peterson does, but they have all served vital roles on Super Bowl contending teams. Running backs don't have to be Saquon Barkley. As fans, for a lot of guys, we hold them to crazy high standards. We have to think less Bo Jackson and more Kevin Falk when we put on our analysis hats. Personally, I can see Devin Neal being trusted the same way Kevin Falk was trusted in all of the Super Bowls that he played in. I really hope that he does have that same sort of effect on the game. A versatile dual threat that can hit defenses through the air and also run them over occasionally on the ground. The way Neal gets up the field and follows behind all of his blockers, whether that be O-linemen or receivers that are further in the secondary, you really start to appreciate the subtle nature of his game. It's how he plays regardless of his speed, not letting it hamper him, but actually using it to force him into a type of patience that makes him even better than faster players. Neal has deceptively quick feet and makes really nice moves in short spaces, which he uses to get behind his own players while cutting off angles from defenders further up in the secondary. If you really watch some of these clips and break down his movement, you can see as he looks at the 2 angles of opposing players and then finds a way to maneuver himself into a position where he focuses on one of them or cancels out the other. His footwork and agility is phenomenal, especially on these cuts. He's shifty and gets really low to the ground, which makes him harder to take down and also hard to stay in front of. When I see Devin Neal, I see third down back written all over his draft card. He might be the best at that role in this entire class, and he has huge upside fulfilling that. Clips like this show Neal's strength in pass protection, and while the play kind of broke down and obviously, a sack into a forced throw isn't exactly the greatest result, you kind of have to be happy here when you watch Neal because he spots the blitzer early and uses his leverage and physicality to shut down the pass rusher. What happened on the other side of the line is not really his fault, but but there's a notion that he's some small back. And that's not true. I'm not sure where the narrative that Neal's a smaller back came from, because despite objectively just not being true, if you actually watch any film, you can tell that Neal is always trying to use his physicality to create things. As a player, I'd say he's one of those guys that never really shies away from contact, so I don't really understand that sort of perspective. Am I going to say that Devin Neal is a future MVP and 2,000-yard rusher? Probably not. But his upside is huge, and I can see a very long, successful career for such a talented player capable of so many different things on the football field. He's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, but he is very, very smart, and he uses his quick feet paired with elite IQ to find holes in the defense. I love his potential as a third down back, and as a pass blocker, he showed a lot of promise. All in all, that's why I think Devin Neal is the steal of the draft for the Saints. Despite not having some of the best picks and not the greatest O-line, I'd be lying if I say I didn't feel at least a little bit of promise. It might not happen immediately, or even with the Saints in general, but I'm expecting big things from Devin Neal.